In October of 1975, Pontiac started building a car that would break every sales record the Grand Prix nameplate had ever set. Within 8 months, dealers would move 228,000 of them, more than double what they had sold the year before. And buried inside that number was something even more remarkable: a production run of exactly 4,878 special edition automobiles finished in a color called Anniversary Gold, fitted with removable glass roof panels engineered by Hurst and powered by one of the last genuine Pontiac 455 cubic inch V8s that would ever leave the factory. Every single one of those 4,878 cars was built in a 10-week window between October 1st and December 12th of 1975, and every single one represented Pontiac's answer to a simple question: how do you celebrate 50 years as an automobile manufacturer when federal regulations are strangling horsepower, the fuel crisis is still fresh in everyone's memory, and the entire personal luxury coupe segment is about to be downsized into oblivion? Pontiac's answer was the 1976 Grand Prix, and it worked so spectacularly well that this single model year remains the highest volume Grand Prix in the car's entire history. But before we dive in, drop a comment with the classic car you want us to cover next. The comment with the most likes becomes our next deep dive. All right, let's get into it. To understand what made the 1976 so different, you need to know where the Grand Prix came from. Pontiac launched the nameplate in 1962 as something that didn't quite fit into any category GM had established. It wasn't a muscle car, it wasn't a full-sized cruiser, and it wasn't exactly a sports car either. What it was, right from the beginning, was a personal luxury coupe before that term even existed in marketing departments. The original car rode on a shortened B-body platform pulled from the full-size Pontiac lineup, came standard with a 389 cubic inch 4-barrel V8, and featured bucket seats and a center console in a package that prioritized driver engagement over pure boulevard cruising. Sales hit 30,000 units that first year and climbed past 72,000 by 1963, which told Pontiac they had tapped into something genuine. The Grand Prix evolved through the mid-60s alongside the rest of Pontiac's lineup, picking up styling updates and engine options as the decade unfolded. But the transformation that truly defined the car came in 1969. That was the year Pontiac pulled the Grand Prix off the full-size platform entirely and dropped it onto a new 118-inch intermediate chassis with proportions that changed everything. Long hood, short deck, a sweeping profile that emphasized motion even when the car was parked. And that front end, vertical slatted grille flanked by round dual headlamps set in squared bezels, borrowing design language directly from the Duesenberg automobiles of the 1930s. Automotive journalists at the time called it neoclassical, which was a polite way of saying Pontiac had built something that looked like nothing else on American roads. Buyers responded by purchasing over 112,000 units in that debut year alone, and the Grand Prix's identity as a performance-oriented personal luxury coupe was locked in. From 1970 through 1972, Pontiac refined that formula without fundamentally changing it. The honeycomb wheels that showed up in 1971 became one of the most iconic visual signatures of the model, and they remain a detail collectors specifically hunt for today. Under the hood, Pontiac offered increasingly potent versions of their own V8s, with the 455 cubic inch engine becoming the performance flagship. These were also the years Pontiac's wide-track handling philosophy really paid dividends, giving the Grand Prix a planted, confident road feel that separated it from competitors that prioritized softness over composure. But by 1972, everyone in Detroit could see what was coming. Federal safety regulations were tightening on multiple fronts. Emission standards were about to compromise engine output in ways that would fundamentally change what American V8s were capable of. And the fuel crisis was casting a shadow on the entire industry's assumptions about what buyers would tolerate in terms of size and fuel consumption. Pontiac had to redesign the Grand Prix from scratch for 1973, and they had to do it under constraints that hadn't existed when they created the 1969 car. The result was genuinely impressive, even if it was different from what came before. The new car landed on GM's A-body platform, sharing basic architecture with the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. It was bigger, heavier, and more formally luxurious than the agile coupe that preceded it. The wheelbase measured 116 inches, overall length stretched past 210 inches, and new federal rollover protection requirements forced designers toward what became known as the colonnade body style, a roof structure with a fixed B-pillar behind the doors rather than the pillarless hardtop greenhouse that had defined American coupes for decades. This was a significant visual change that affected every personal luxury coupe at General Motors that year, but Pontiac's designers handled it well. The long, elegant roofline featured small opera windows flanking the rear of the cabin, giving the car an upscale, formal appearance that actually suited its new luxury orientation. Inside, the 1973 Grand Prix was genuinely opulent for its price point. The instrument panel featured genuine African crossfire veneer, not the simulated wood that would show up later. The seats were new high-back buckets with adjustable lumbar support, which was legitimately innovative at the time. And the options list let buyers load the car with power accessories and upgraded audio equipment that would have looked at home in automobiles costing significantly more. The SJ package added the performance edge, upgraded suspension components, rally gauge cluster, and the 455 cubic inch V8 as standard equipment. In 1973, that 455 with 4-barrel carburation still made 310 horsepower by the old gross rating method, and even with emissions-related detuning in subsequent years, it remained a potent unit. Sales for the 1973 Grand Prix jumped from about 90,000 units in the final year of the previous generation to over 150,000, making it immediately clear that Pontiac had read the market correctly. The 1974 and 1975 model years continued that basic formula with evolutionary updates, but by the time 1975 wrapped up, the Grand Prix hit a wall. Production dropped to roughly 86,000 units, a serious red flag for a model that had been moving 150,000 cars annually just a couple years prior. The design was starting to feel dated after 3 years without a major refresh, and the competitive environment wasn't getting any easier. The Chevrolet Monte Carlo was posting massive numbers. The Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme was one of the best-selling cars in America, period. And Ford and Chrysler were pushing their own personal luxury offerings with increasing aggression. Pontiac was also dealing with the departure of the Grand Am from the lineup at the same time, which created a gap at the sportier end of the intermediate market that the Grand Prix now needed to help fill. Something decisive needed to happen, and Pontiac delivered it. The centerpiece of the 1976 overhaul was the front end, and it was dramatic enough that many people initially thought they were looking at an entirely new car rather than an updated version of the existing car. The twin round dual headlamps that had anchored the Grand Prix's face since the Duesenberg-inspired era of 1969 were gone entirely, replaced by 4 rectangular headlight units arranged side by side in a horizontal configuration flanking both sides of the new grille. Quad rectangular headlights were the big styling trend sweeping across the entire personal luxury segment for 1976. The Monte Carlo, the Cutlass Supreme, the Buick Regal, virtually every personal luxury coupe in the American market made the same transition simultaneously. It was one of those rare moments in automotive styling history where an entire class of cars turned a corner together, and the way each manufacturer handled the transition said a lot about the quality of their design teams. Some of the results were better than others, but on the Grand Prix, Pontiac's execution was particularly impressive.
Rather than simply bolting 4 rectangles onto the existing design, Pontiac's studio created an entirely new grille structure to accompany them, and the result became known as the waterfall grille. That waterfall grille is what makes the 1976 Grand Prix instantly recognizable to this day. Instead of sitting flat and vertical between the headlights like a conventional grille would, the 1976 Grand Prix grille folded dramatically over the leading edge of the header panel, cascading forward and downward over the top of the front fascia in a way that emphasized the pointed V-nose of the hood and gave the whole front end a sense of momentum even when the car was standing still. The vertical bar pattern of the grille itself was crisp and precise, and the combination of those four rectangular headlights, the chrome trim details, and that cascading waterfall grille structure produced a front end that was simultaneously more modern than what it replaced and more visually interesting than anything else in its competitive set that year. Automotive writers at the time noted that where the previous front end had a certain ceremonial neoclassical formality about it, the new 1976 face was dynamic and forward-looking. The taillight lenses at the rear were also freshened as part of the package, giving the car a cleaner, more cohesive appearance from every angle. Inside, the changes for 1976 were more subtle but still meaningful. All models received new simulated rosewood interior trim in place of the genuine wood veneer used in earlier years, which gave the cabin a consistent, polished appearance across the lineup. Pontiac also made a strategic decision to broaden the Grand Prix's appeal by creating a genuine entry-level version. The base Grand Prix received a price reduction of about $500 below the outgoing model to better compete at the lower end of the personal luxury market, and it was fitted as standard with a new 60/40 split full-width bench seat with a fold-down center armrest that made better use of the front cabin space. The base car also received a new standard engine for 1976, the Pontiac 350 cubic inch two-barrel V8, which at 160 horsepower was actually the smallest engine ever fitted to a Grand Prix up to that moment in the model's history. This was Pontiac acknowledging the fuel economy reality of the mid-70s while still keeping the Grand Prix within reach of buyers who prioritized refinement and comfort over outright power. Moving up to the SJ, things got considerably more interesting. The SJ was the sporting variant of the Grand Prix lineup, and for 1976 it came standard with a 400 cubic inch four-barrel V8 producing 185 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers sound modest by pre-emission standards, but remember, we're talking SAE net ratings here, not the old gross figures that measured engines on a stand without accessories. In real-world driving, that 400 four-barrel delivered smooth, effortless power that suited the Grand Prix's character perfectly. Beyond the engine, the SJ package delivered a properly sorted driving experience through Pontiac's radial-tuned suspension, a handling setup that included specifically tuned shock absorbers front and rear, revised suspension geometry, and Pontiac-branded steel-belted radial tires that gave the big coupe noticeably better composure in corners than any typical personal luxury coupe of the era had any right to possess. The SJ also brought along bucket seats with a center console, a full rally gauge cluster that let drivers actually monitor what their engine was doing in real time, and special wheel covers that gave the car a sportier exterior appearance. For buyers who wanted both the size and luxury of the Grand Prix combined with an actual driver's car experience, the SJ was the answer. The LJ sat at the top of the standard production lineup, delivering a more premium experience for buyers whose priority was outright luxury rather than sporting character. The LJ featured velour upholstery options, more extensive exterior pipeline detailing, and a comprehensive suite of comfort and convenience features that made the Grand Prix feel genuinely competitive with cars from luxury brands charging considerably more money. The complete engine menu for 1976 ran from that base 350 two-barrel at 160 horsepower through a two-barrel 400 at 170 horsepower for buyers who wanted the larger displacement without full four-barrel performance, to the four-barrel 400 at 185 horsepower standard in the SJ, and all the way up to the 455 cubic inch L75 V8 at 200 horsepower available as a paid option across all three trim levels. That 455 represented the absolute pinnacle of what Pontiac still had available in 1976, and its presence on the order seat at all was a testament to how seriously Pontiac still took the performance side of the Grand Prix's personality, even in the depths of the emissions era. 200 horsepower by the SAE net rating system sounds modest by the standards of what the 455 had been capable of just 4 or 5 years earlier, when the same basic architecture was producing over 300 horsepower in the most enthusiastic applications. But automotive writers of the period consistently pointed out that the SAE net figures were considerably more conservative than the reality suggested, and that the torque characteristics of the big Pontiac unit in particular still gave the car a genuinely impressive feel from behind the wheel. Moving a car the size of the 1976 Grand Prix with smooth, effortless authority was exactly what the 455 was built to do, and it did it better than any smaller displacement option on the list.
Every one of these engines sent power through Pontiac's proven 3-speed turbo-hydromatic automatic, which was as smooth and durable as anything in the industry at the time. There was no manual gearbox available for the Grand Prix. This was not a car designed for heel and toe downshifts. It was a car designed for effortless full-throttle highway acceleration and the kind of relaxed, confident cruising that made long distances feel like nothing at all. And then was the Golden Anniversary Edition, the car within the car that made 1976 a genuinely unique chapter in Grand Prix history, and the primary reason this particular model year commands the attention and respect it does among serious Pontiac collectors today. 1976 marked exactly 50 years since Pontiac was established as an automobile brand in 1926, and the division decided to commemorate the milestone in a way that was befitting the Grand Prix status as the flagship of the Pontiac personal luxury lineup. The result was the Golden Anniversary Grand Prix, and every decision made in creating this special edition car, from the color to the trim to the mechanical specification to the extraordinary roof option, combined to produce something unlike any production car Pontiac had built before. Every single Golden Anniversary Grand Prix was finished in a color Pontiac designated Anniversary Gold, a deep, rich, metallic gold that caught light differently depending on the angle, shifting between warm amber and polished brass as the sun moved across it. Against that golden exterior, Pontiac paired a white vinyl opera roof, white bodyside moldings, and precisely applied white pipelining that traced the character lines of the colonnade body with exceptional care. The visual effect was nothing short of arresting. These were large, dramatic automobiles in a color that made absolutely no attempt to blend in with traffic, and they wore their golden livery with a confidence that felt entirely appropriate for a 50th anniversary statement from one of America's most storied automobile brands. The detail work extended to the badging, which received special treatment throughout. A commemorative 50-year anniversary hood ornament, distinct from any piece in the standard Grand Prix catalog, rose from the leading edge of the hood. The trunk lock cover was fitted with a golden medallion marking the occasion. Inside, the sports steering wheel center bore a special gold-colored Pontiac arrowhead emblem, and the overall LJ interior specification that underpinned the anniversary car brought along the velour upholstery, the tilt steering column, power windows, power door locks, power driver's seat, faux gauge cluster, air conditioning, and the AM/FM stereo with 8-track player. The Rally 2 aluminum wheels were standard equipment on every anniversary car, their polished spokes tying the exterior presentation together with a level of detail that genuine collectors deeply appreciate. But the single feature that set the Golden Anniversary Grand Prix entirely apart from anything Pontiac had done before, or that most of the American automobile industry had done before, was the Hurst hatch roof. In 1976, T-tops were still a genuinely exotic feature in American passenger cars. The removable tinted glass panel system had existed on the Chevrolet Corvette since 1968, but bringing a production-viable version of that concept to larger mainstream coupes had required engineering work that Hurst, the legendary performance parts company already famous throughout the industry for their precise and durable shifters, had undertaken with their Hurst hatch system. The Hurst hatch roof consisted of a pair of tinted glass panels mounted above the front seating area, each secured by a latching mechanism that allowed them to be unlatched, carefully lifted free, and stored in the trunk, converting the Grand Prix from a fixed-roof personal luxury coupe into something that captured much of the open-air experience of a convertible. On a warm afternoon with both panels out, sunlight pouring in from above and a light breeze moving through the cabin, the Grand Prix became a fundamentally different car to be inside. For 1976, the Hurst hatch system was also available as a paid option on the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme and the Buick Regal, but it was the Golden Anniversary Grand Prix that made the deepest impression, because on this car, the T-tops were not an extra cost option, they were standard equipment. Every single one of the 4,878 anniversary cars that Pontiac built came with the Hurst hatch roof installed from the factory. And powering all 4,878 of them was the 455 cubic inch L75 V8, giving each car that smooth, effortless power delivery that made long-distance cruising an event rather than merely a transit.
Pontiac manufactured all of these cars in a concentrated production window that ran from October 1st to December 12th of 1975, which means the entire run of 4,878 Golden Anniversary Grand Prix was assembled in approximately 10 weeks. They hit dealerships as 1976 models, and they sold. The broader market's response to the redesigned 1976 Grand Prix across all trim levels was equally emphatic. Total production for the 1976 model year came in at 228,901 units, making it the highest volume year in Grand Prix history. Breaking it down by trim level, 110,814 buyers chose the base model, 88,232 chose the SJ, and 29,045 went with the LJ, of which those 4,878 anniversary editions made the most exclusive subset. In the entire personal luxury coupe segment, only the Chevrolet Monte Carlo outsold the Grand Prix that year, moving about 353,000 units at a lower price point and across a wider market. Within its true competitive set, the Grand Prix was the clear winner. The 2016 Grand Prix also occupies a deeply significant position in the broader arc of American automobile history because it arrived at the absolute peak of the personal luxury coupe's dominance of American car culture, and it delivered its best performance just as that era was approaching its end. The 1978 model year brought with it General Motors' sweeping downsizing program, which fundamentally transformed every personal luxury coupe in the lineup. The new generation Grand Prix that arrived for 1978 was substantially smaller, lighter, and more fuel-conscious than the Colonnade cars that preceded it. The dramatic Colonnade proportions were replaced by a more compact shape. The 455 cubic inch engine was gone from the order sheet entirely. The era of genuinely large, genuinely theatrical, genuinely powerful American personal luxury coupes, the era that had produced the Duesenberg-inspired 1969, the mahogany-trimmed 1973, and the spectacular Golden Anniversary Edition, was over. The 1977 Grand Prix, which was the last of the Colonnade generation, sold even better in raw numbers, approximately 288,000 units, but it received only minor styling revisions compared to the ground the 1976 had broken. Notably, the Hurst T-tops that had debuted exclusively on the Golden Anniversary Edition in 1976 became a regular over-the-counter option on the 1977 car, which tells you everything about how the market had responded to seeing them on the anniversary cars. The 1976 was the transformation and the statement. The 1977 was the refinement and the farewell. Today, the 1976 Grand Prix occupies a special and well-deserved place in the collector market, and the Golden Anniversary Edition cars in particular have achieved genuine collectible status that seems to strengthen as the years pass. Finding an anniversary car in original, unrestored condition with the matching numbers 455 engine, the original Golden Anniversary gold paint still showing its depth, the vinyl roof and white paint striping intact, and both Hurst hatch panels still latching cleanly is a legitimate challenge that takes patience and persistence. The combination of a limited production run of 4,878 units, 50 years of attrition, and the fact that these cars went through a period of relative neglect before the 1973 through 1977 Colonnade generation developed its current following means that genuinely excellent survivors are few enough that encountering one at a show is a real occasion. Even a standard 1976 Grand Prix SJ with the 4-barrel 400 under the hood, the waterfall grille catching the light, and the radial-tuned suspension giving the big coupe a composure that surprised anyone who expected it to wallow, represents one of the most complete expressions of what the American personal luxury coupe was capable of at its very best. The 1976 Grand Prix didn't just update a formula, it elevated that formula to its highest expression right at the moment the formula was running out of road. Pontiac saw what was coming, understood they had one more chance to make a statement before everything changed, and they executed it with a level of precision and confidence that produced sales records the Grand Prix would never match again. So here's the question for you. If you could spec out a 1976 Grand Prix exactly how you wanted it, would you go with the Golden Anniversary Edition with the 455 and the T-tops? Or would you build an SJ with the 4-barrel 400 and add your own modifications? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more deep dives like this into the cars that define their eras, hit that subscribe button.
we've got a lot more stories to tell.